So 7th grade, we're going to continue with compound events. And this time, we already talked about compound events or when you have more than one. This time, we're going to talk about and, okay? So you have to draw a king and draw a queen in order to win the game. Or draw a red marble and a blue marble out of the bag. And with and, oops, that kind of erased, but you are going to multiply the probabilities this time because it is actually much more difficult to have to reach into a bag of marbles, pull out a red one, and then pull out a blue one in order to win the game. Okay, that has a difficulty level that is definitely different. So we would multiply the probabilities. So we're going to jump right into a couple examples here. So if I look at a dice, again, a standard 6-sided die, what is the probability? I'm going to roll it twice. So I'm going to roll once, pick up the dice, roll a second time. What is the probability that I will roll a 1 and then I will roll a 3? Well, just like before with the or and adding, we're going to find the probability of each one, but we're going to multiply them. So the probability of rolling a 1 on a 6-sided die is 1 out of 6 times the probability of rolling a 3 is also 1 out of 6. Now you remember the song, multiplying fractions, that's no problem. Take the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom, right? So 1 times 1 is 1. 6 times 6 is 36. So there is only a 1 out of 36 chance that I will take a dice, roll a 1, pick it up, and then on my second roll get a 3. Not nearly as simple as doing just one of those or the or where I could add them together. Okay? Second example, what is the probability, and I actually have a deck of cards right here, that if I could draw a king out of the deck of cards and then draw a queen? Well, drawing the king is easy. We know that that probability is 4 out of 52. The question is, what's the probability that I will draw a queen? Now, a lot of you may be screaming at the screen, Mrs. Lang, it's 4 out of 52 because there's 52 cards in a deck and there are 4 queens. The question is, what happens after it depends on what I do. Sorry, that was a joker. After I draw that king. So let's say I do it. Let's say I draw a king out of this deck of cards. The probability of the queen is going to depend. What am I going to do with this king? You see, if I put the king back in the deck of cards, shuffle it up, right? There are 52 cards again in this deck. So yes, the probability of drawing that queen would be 4 out of 52. But what if I don't put the king back in the deck of cards? Now how many cards are there? Now there's only 51. There are still 4 queens. But now there's a 4 out of 51 chance of drawing a queen instead of a 4 out of 52. So whether or not I replace this king back into the deck of cards does make a big difference on what my final probability is. Because am I multiplying by 4 out of 52 or am I multiplying by 4 out of 51? Which leads us into our next 2 vocabulary terms. When dealing with compound events, there are 2 types, especially when dealing with your and. The first are independent events. Independent events are when the first does not affect the probability of the second. It will not affect the second. So if you notice, this conundrum that we're in never came up with rolling the dice. Because if I have a dice, there are 6 sides to it. 1 out of 6 is a 1. I have a 1 out of 6 chance of rolling a 1. I roll that dice. Let's say I get the 1. If I pick it up, there are still 6 sides to this dice. Nothing has changed. So the probability of rolling a 3 stays the same. It's still 1 out of 3. What I roll on that first roll has absolutely no effect on the probability of the second. Now, drawing from a deck of cards. If I take that king out, but I put it back, there are still 52 cards in this deck. I didn't change anything. Okay, I didn't change anything. So that would be independent. Okay, I have a 4 out of 52 chance of getting a queen. If I take a card out, but I put it immediately back, there's still a 4 out of 52 chance of getting a queen. I didn't change anything. Those are independent events. The first will have absolutely no effect on what happens on the second. Okay? So yeah, independent are great. That makes things a lot easier. However, I gotta find this king again. I don't know. I have a different king, but I have a king. The second, dependent events. Dependent is when the first does affect the second. In other words, the second is dependent on what happens in the first try. Example, drawing a card and not replacing it. Because right now, with a full deck of cards, there is a 4 out of 52 chance of drawing this queen. However, if I take a king and set it aside, there is now a 4 out of 51 chance of drawing a queen. By not replacing that card, I change the probability of what will happen with the queen. Okay? Similar dependent events, drawing marbles out of a bag. So if I have 10 marbles in a bag and I want to know what's the probability of drawing a red and then a blue, well, if I draw the red out and put it back, that's independent. There's still 10 marbles in the bag. However, if I drew the red out and I kept it out, there's now 9 marbles in the bag for that probability of blue. So I have changed what's going to happen with that second probability. So those are dependent events. Now, I'm still going to multiply. So let's say I draw a king and then a queen without replacing. And so those words will be there. So you're like, well, Mrs. Lang, how will we know if the card is replaced or not? They will tell you in the directions. They will say, what's the probability of drawing a king and then a queen without replacing the card, or you do replace the card. Okay, if I do replace the card, it stays 52. If I don't, the probability of getting that queen is 4 out of 51. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and multiply the fractions, which is 16 over some large number. Okay, and you can simplify if needed. But that's how you do and. And is just multiplying instead of adding, but you do have to know, am I dealing with an independent event? So what is the probability of that second event? Did we replace the card or did we not? Because that makes a difference.